I knew it. What's wrong? Nothing. Just organizing.
They tried to erase her name from history, not because she was dangerous, but because of who she was involved with. A woman whispered about in Mafia circles, untouchable, unpredictable, hiding a secret that could shake an entire nation. Because the man she fell for wasn't just powerful, he was the president. And what they had together was never supposed to exist. But when their affair was discovered, it didn't just threaten reputations, it threatened everything. So they made a decision, one that would bury the truth for decades. Or at least, that's what they thought. Rome. A rainy Tuesday night. Not romantic rain, the kind that makes people put their heads down and stop paying attention to who's standing next to them. That inattention, that one small moment of carelessness, was the first mistake. Her name was Elena Vasari, but nobody called her that anymore. To the men who feared her, and there were many, she was La Contessa, a name spoken in back rooms, in encrypted messages, in places where armed men still removed their hats out of respect when she walked in. 41 years old, never arrested, never photographed at a crime scene, never once caught making a mistake, because Elena Vasari didn't make mistakes. She was at the Palazzo Adriano that night for a meeting. 15 minutes, a quiet corridor, a man who owed her a favor. Business, only business. But then the security detail shifted. She noticed before anyone else did, the subtle repositioning near the entrance, the way conversations paused mid-sentence, the way the entire room changed its weight. She could read rooms the way musicians read music, instinctively, completely, several bars ahead of everyone else. He walked in at 9:47 p.m. President James Calloway, 47, 2 terms deep, final year of his presidency, the kind of man photographs never quite captured, not because of his height, but because of his gravity, like someone who had been under enormous pressure for so long they had compressed into something harder than ordinary people. He was also, Elena noted immediately, exhausted. Not tired, exhausted, the kind that lives in the bones, the kind that comes from carrying things you can never put down, never share, never fully show anyone. She recognized it instantly. She carried the same thing. Their eyes met across the room by accident. These things always start by accident. He looked away first, which surprised her. Men in his position never looked away first. Holding eye contact was reflex for them, an assertion of dominance. He looked away. Then, 3 seconds later, he looked back, as if he couldn't help it. She didn't smile, didn't move. She simply held his gaze long enough for him to understand one thing clearly. She was not impressed, not intimidated, and not available in the ways women at these events made themselves available to men like him. That was the moment everything changed. James Calloway had spent 23 years surrounded by people who wanted something from him. He had become, out of pure survival, extraordinary at detecting want, at sensing the lean, the agenda beneath the compliment, the calculation behind every smile. Elena Vasari wanted nothing from him, and he had absolutely no idea what to do with that. His chief of staff, Marcus Webb, a man who had been reading Calloway's face for 14 years, noticed the pause, leaned in, said something quiet. Calloway nodded, and then, this was the part Marcus would replay in his mind for years, the president excused himself from the ambassador he'd been greeting and walked deliberately toward her. She saw him coming, 30 seconds to decide. She assessed him the way she assessed every variable, quickly, completely, without sentiment. Danger level? Extreme. Not because of who he was, but because of how he was walking toward her, like a man who had forgotten for just a moment to be careful. She should have walked away right then, but she didn't. "I've been told," he said, arriving beside her, "that you're the most interesting person in this room, and I've also been told I'm not supposed to know who you are." She looked at him. "Then we already have something in common." He smiled, not the public smile, not the one trained for cameras, something smaller, something private, something that belonged to a person, not a president. "James," he said, extending his hand. "I know who you are," she replied, shook his hand once, firmly, released it before it became anything more than a handshake. They spoke for 11 minutes. Neither could fully account for what was said afterward, not because it was forgettable, but because it existed between the words, not inside them. He asked about the Caravaggio on the wall behind her. She told him what the painter was actually trying to say. He listened, completely, without preparing his next sentence, something powerful men almost never do. Then she said something he would never forget. The most dangerous people are never the ones with the most weapons. They're the ones with the most patience. He looked at her for a long moment. "Which are you?" She picked up her glass. "Good night, Mr. President." And she walked away without looking back. That was her second mistake. And if you think the story ends there, it's only just beginning. He found her again 3 weeks later. This wasn't coincidence. Calloway had the full machinery of the most powerful government on Earth at his disposal. He told himself it was a security matter, that she'd been flagged, that he needed to understand who she was. He told himself a lot of things. The file that landed on his desk was thick. Elena Vasari, born Naples, 1979. Father, mid-level Camorra. Dead when she was 14, under circumstances everyone understood but no one ever said out loud. Mother, a literature professor. Dead of cancer. No siblings, no known attachments. At 26, she vanished from the legitimate record entirely. The next time she appeared in any document, she was already La Contessa, already untouchable. How she had built what she built in those missing years, 3 intelligence agencies had spent years trying to answer that question. They never got close. She didn't run drugs, didn't run weapons. She ran leverage, secrets, information. She was a dealer in the most valuable commodity on Earth, what powerful people were hiding. Calloway read the file once, then twice, then closed it, then opened it again. Marcus Webb found him at his desk at 2 a.m. and said nothing, because Marcus Webb was extraordinarily good at knowing when not to speak. "Have a car ready," Calloway said quietly. "Off book, personal driver, tomorrow night." "Sir." "Off book," Calloway repeated. And his voice carried something Marcus had heard before and always feared, the sound of a man who had already decided. That was the moment Marcus Webb should have pushed back harder. He didn't. Their second meeting was in Vienna. She had known he was coming. She had her own intelligence, in some regions frankly better than his. She debated whether to be there for exactly 2 hours, longer than she'd debated anything in years. She was there. They ate for 3 hours, drank 2 bottles of wine, talked about everything except what they actually were to each other. She told him about her father. Not the full truth, but the texture of it. What it meant to grow up in a world where power was the only language anyone respected. He told her about the night he won the election, about standing on that stage and feeling not triumph, not joy, but a vertiginous terror at the size of what he had just agreed to carry. Then she asked him something no one had ever asked. "Did you actually want it? The presidency? Or did you want what you thought it meant?" He was quiet for a long time. "I'm not sure those are different things." "They're always different things," she said. And that, right there, was what destroyed his composure completely. She said true things without apology. In his world, truth was a negotiating tool, something deployed carefully, strategically. With Elena, it simply arrived. Direct, clean, slightly devastating. He reached across the table and touched her hand. She looked at his hand, then at him. "You understand what this means?" "No," he admitted. "Do you?"
I understand it better than you do, she said, which is why I should leave right now. She should have left. She didn't. And that was the mistake that would cost them everything. Budapest, Lisbon, Geneva. Each meeting harder to hide, each risk bigger than the last. And neither of them was stopping. A sitting American president, a woman that 3 intelligence agencies were quietly monitoring, conducting what could only be called the most dangerous love affair of the decade, in the stolen hours between their official lives. He traveled without his full detail, a violation of 17 protocols, using 3 hand-selected agents loyal enough to keep secrets and smart enough not to ask questions. She taught him things about the world he governed that no intelligence briefing had ever captured, not the structure of organized crime, but the human architecture underneath it, the way systems of power, legal and illegal, rhyme with each other, the way every empire, no matter how it's built, eventually collapses into the same 3 things: loyalty, fear, and the careful management of what people know. He showed her something she hadn't expected: real vulnerability. Not the performed kind, not the careful emotional disclosure of a man media trained to seem human. She would find him sometimes, in those stolen evenings, simply sitting with his thoughts, undefended, raw, like a man who had taken off armor he'd been wearing so long he'd forgotten it was armor. She found this more unsettling than anything else about him. Because here's what you need to understand about Elena Vasari. She had not allowed herself to love anything in a very long time. Love in her world was a liability. It was the wound you couldn't see, until someone put a knife in it. But somewhere between Vienna and Budapest and the safe house in Geneva, she made the worst mistake of her life. She started to mean it. And the moment you start meaning it, you stop being careful about the right things. But they didn't realize something. Someone had already noticed, and they had been watching for a very long time.
It started with a photograph, and that photograph was never supposed to exist. Not a clear one, a partial image, grainy, shot from a Lisbon rooftop with a long lens, 2 figures on a balcony at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday in March. Partially obscured, barely readable, but enough. The photographer's name was Daniel Kessler, not a journalist, not a private investigator, a man who worked for a man who worked for a man, that specific kind of operational distance that exists to make accountability impossible. He had been following Elena for 6 weeks, not because of her, because a wealthy Swiss financier, a man Elena had quietly, surgically destroyed 18 months earlier, wanted leverage, wanted evidence to make her inconvenient. He found something far more dangerous than he was looking for. When the photograph reached the financier's desk, he stared at it for a very long time. He understood value better than he understood anything, and he felt the weight of what he was holding the way a geologist feels stone and knows before any test that it's gold. But he also understood danger, and this was the most dangerous thing he had ever held. He made 2 copies, one safe in Zurich, one in the Cayman Islands. Then he made a phone call, not to a journalist, not to a government, to a man named Victor Solis, political consultant, intelligence operative, the most sophisticated blackmailer in the Western Hemisphere, and in practice, all 3 simultaneously. Solis studied the photograph in silence for nearly a full minute. Then, who else has seen this? 3 people, the financier said, all of whom understand the situation. Make it 2, Solis said, immediately. And just like that, quietly, invisibly, without a single raised voice, the trap closed. And if you think that was the worst part, it wasn't even close. Meanwhile, 600 miles away, Elena's phone rang at 3 a.m. She answered on the first ring. She always answered on the first ring. The voice belonged to Soph, the woman who ran Elena's intelligence architecture with surgical precision. We have a problem. Not issue, not development. Problem. Elena sat up in the dark. Tell me. Soph told her. Elena said nothing for a long time. How good is the image? Good enough. Who has it? The chain led to Brandt, the financier she had supposedly dealt with cleanly 18 months earlier. She had underestimated his vindictiveness. She knew exactly what had distracted her. And above Brandt? We're working on it. But Elena, a pause waited with something. There's a contact in the chain, American government ties. The room compressed. Which branch? We don't know yet. Find out, tonight. She hung up, sat in the dark for 17 minutes, mapping, drawing invisible lines between people and interests and outcomes, finding leverage points, calculating angles. But this time, for the first time in years, the math had a variable she hadn't accounted for, her own feelings. And feelings ruin the math every time. She picked up a separate phone, one that existed for exactly this purpose, sent a message to a number stored under no name. We need to talk, now. The response came in 4 minutes. I know. He already knew. Marcus Webb had received his own alert 40 minutes earlier. One of the off-book agents, noticing something wrong on a routine sweep, had done exactly what he was supposed to do, brought it directly to Marcus, no one else. Marcus had sat with it for 40 minutes before waking the president. When Calloway looked at the assessment, not the photograph itself, but who held it and what that meant, something happened to his face that Marcus had never seen before and would never be able to fully describe. It wasn't fear. It was something more total than fear. The expression of a man watching the ground shift beneath everything he had ever built. How contained is it? Calloway asked. Marcus held his gaze. It's not yet. And that's when it all started to fall apart.
This is where you need to pay attention, because from this point on, every move had consequences, and one wrong decision would destroy everything. What happened next wasn't just about a photograph. It wasn't just about reputation. It was about an invisible war between two of the most dangerous people in the world, fighting for control of a secret that could end a presidency, ignite a scandal, and rewrite history. They met in person one last time, a farmhouse in Umbria, 2 hours from Rome, no staff, no security. Elena's insistence. She didn't trust his agents anymore. They arrived separately, within 20 minutes of each other. When he walked in, she was at the window, looking out at the hills. She didn't turn immediately. "Elena, don't," she said, not harshly, with a precision that was somehow worse than anything harsh would have been. She turned, and he understood immediately, with the specific intelligence of a man who had spent his life reading rooms, that she had already passed through the grief of this moment, already made her calculations, was standing on the other side of something he was still approaching. "How many people?" she asked. "3 who matter," he said. "Salas has the image. His contact has government ties. Treasury, we think. There's a third party we haven't identified yet." "I have more," she said. She told him what Sophie had found, the chain above Brandt, the surveillance that hadn't begun 6 weeks ago, but more than 4 months ago, before Lisbon, before Vienna. Someone had known or suspected and had been building quietly, patiently ever since. Calloway went very still. Internal? Possibly, or someone close enough to watch you, someone who noticed, she paused, before I did, what was happening between us. Neither of them addressed those last 3 words. "Calloway will make a demand," Calloway said. "That's how he operates. Yes, and whatever it is, you cannot give it to him. Elena, if you give him what he wants, he owns you, not for a year, for the rest of your life." Her voice was flat. Final. "The first demand is never the last. And if I don't give it to him? The photograph goes public, or it moves through official channels, a congressional inquiry, an intelligence review. Either way." She stopped. He finished it quietly. "Either way, I'm destroyed." "You," she corrected, "not both of us. You." He understood. Her exposure was manageable. She had systems in place, identities to retreat into. She existed in many ways outside the jurisdictions that could truly harm her.
But James Calloway was the President of the United States. There was no outside. There was only the office and the history and the ruin. The demand from Salas arrived 61 hours later. It wasn't financial. It was structural. 1 appointment, One individual placed inside a federal regulatory agency positioned to influence one specific investigation threatening Salas's most important client. Elegant, invisible, the kind of corruption that looks like nothing to anyone not already looking for it. Calloway said he needed time. Salas gave him 48 hours. Marcus Webb spent those 48 hours in controlled emergency. 4 options, all of them bad. Comply with Salas, create a permanent lever. Go public, destroy the presidency. Find something on Salas, a clock that wouldn't run in 48 hours. Or find a way to make the photograph and everyone holding it cease to be a problem entirely. That 4th option was the one Marcus didn't write down. It was the one Elena was already executing. She spent the same 48 hours doing what she did better than anyone alive, pulling threads, mapping the network above Salas, and in doing so, she found something Salas did not know she would find. The unidentified third party above Brandt was himself exposed, not to her, to a completely separate matter, a debt accumulating for 7 years, held by people who had no idea what it had just become worth. Elena called in a favor, a very large one, the kind you spend once and never get to spend again. Within 36 hours, the third party was no longer a problem, which left Salas holding a photograph attached to a chain that led nowhere, which left him suddenly, dangerously exposed. Elena sent him a message through a channel that made clear, with no ambiguity, exactly who was sending it. 3 things, 3 truths about Victor Salas. Not crimes, just truths. The kind that delivered to the right people at the right moment would reduce everything he'd ever built to ash. No demand, no ultimatum. Just information, laid quietly on the table like a blade. This was what people never understood about Elena Vasari until it was too late. She didn't threaten, she informed. The threat assembled itself in the mind of the person receiving it, and it was always worse than anything she would have actually said. Salas did not respond. The 48 hours expired. No approach to Calloway. The photograph went quiet. But here's what Elena knew and chose not to tell him. Quiet is not the same as gone. Salas was paused, not neutralized. The photograph still existed. The people who knew would always exist. Information, once alive, does not die. It waits. She understood this better than anyone, which is why she had already, before she'd even finished dealing with Salas, begun planning the next phase. She called him one final time. He answered on the first ring. "It's handled," she said. A long silence. "How?" "You don't need to know how." "Elena." "James." She used his name deliberately, first time since the farmhouse. "There's something I need you to hear. I need you to hear it without responding, without asking questions." A pause. She steadied herself in a way she didn't think he could detect. He could. He had learned to hear her.
Which was the most dangerous thing. "I need you to hear it, and then I need you to let me go." The silence that followed was the longest of his life. "They're going to come back," she said. "Salas, or someone exactly like him. Someone always comes back. Because this exists. Because we exist. And every time they come back, the cost is higher. More people know. And the more people who know..." She didn't finish. She didn't need to. "What are you saying?" he said. Not quite a question. "I'm saying the only way to protect what you've built, the only way to protect what matters, is for me to stop existing." A beat of silence so sharp it had edges. "Not literally," she said, and in another life it might have been a small, dark laugh. "I've done this before. A different name, a different city, a different version of a life." A pause.
Elena Vasari has to disappear, and the woman she was to you has to disappear with her." He said nothing for a very long time. "And you?" he said finally, quietly. "What happens to you?" She sat with that question longer than she'd sat with anything in years, and inside it she found the exact shape of what she was losing. Not the relationship, she was practiced at losing things. The feeling. The specific, treacherous, irreplaceable feeling of being truly known by someone, of spending 4 months in the presence of a person who wanted nothing from her except the truth of her. "I survive," she said. "I always survive." And she hung up. He didn't realize it yet, but that was the last time he would ever hear her voice. Here is what the record shows. On April 14th, 3 years into Calloway's second term, Elena Vasari was reported killed in a maritime accident off the coast of Croatia, a private vessel. No survivors recovered. The news appeared in 2 Italian newspapers and 1 Slovenian intelligence digest. Brief, unverified, the kind of item taken seriously only by the people who understand what it means. Interpol closed its file. The Swiss financier, whose name was quietly removed from every document in which it had ever appeared, declined to comment on Elena Vasari to anyone, ever again, until his death of natural causes 4 years later. Victor Salas relocated to Buenos Aires, legitimate consultant, South American energy sector. Never once mentioned the photograph. James Calloway completed his second term, one of the highest approval ratings in the modern era. Presidential Library, a memoir praised for its unusual emotional honesty. No mention of Rome, no mention of Vienna, no mention of a farmhouse in Umbria, no mention of a last phone call, no mention of a woman who had looked at him with complete clarity and told him the truth about something he'd already known. Marcus Webb gave one interview years later, described Calloway's second term as the most complex period of his career for reasons that will probably never be fully understood. The interviewer pressed him. Marcus smiled and changed the subject, the way a man does when what he's protecting is something he will carry to his grave. The photograph, the original, every copy, every known iteration, was never published, never leaked, never used. 3 researchers who have spent years studying the Calloway administration believe this represents one of the most successful cover-up operations in modern political history. They cannot agree on who ran it. They cannot agree on how. They can only agree on one thing. It was executed with a precision that bordered on the supernatural. Some of them, the ones who have spent the most time in the margins, following threads into the places threads go when they don't want to be followed, have developed a theory. The theory is that it wasn't run from the presidential side. Now, here is what the record does not show. 11 days after Elena Vasari's name moved from the present tense into the past tense in every intelligence file that referenced her, a woman arrived at a small hotel in Lisbon. Her passport said Marta Souza, 44 years old, brown hair, cash payment, 3 nights, dinner alone each evening at a restaurant 2 streets away, a place where the owner didn't ask questions and the evening light came off the water golden and still. On the second night, she was sitting at her usual table when she caught, on the restaurant television, volume low, 3 seconds before the channel changed, a clip from an American news channel. Former President James Calloway, attending some foundation opening, older, recognizable, still carrying himself with that specific gravity, still with that quality around the eyes, the stillness of a man who is keeping something. The woman who was not Elena Vasari finished her wine slowly, paid her bill, walked back through the Lisbon evening without hurrying. She was very good at not thinking about things she had decided not to think about. She was almost completely successful. She did not sleep well that night. She hadn't slept well in a long time. In the morning, she was gone.
But before she left, she did one thing, a small thing, perhaps meaningless, perhaps the most important thing in this entire story. She wrote something on a piece of paper, a date, a location, a time, folded it once, left it at the front desk addressed to a name, not hers, not his, a name both of them had used once in Vienna as a private joke between two people who were supposed to be careful and had forgotten, just for a moment, to be careful.
She walked out into the Lisbon morning without looking back. The paper sat at the front desk for 3 days. On the 3rd day, someone came to collect it. The hotel staff couldn't agree on a description. The security camera in the lobby had, unusually, malfunctioned between 9 and 10 a.m. that morning. The paper was gone. Whether anyone ever arrived at the date and location it named, whether two people who had chosen to stop existing for each other once sat in a room somewhere and faced what they had buried, no intelligence file, no investigation, no journalist has ever been able to determine. Maybe it happened. Maybe it didn't. Maybe Elena Vasari is still out there, right now, wearing a name that doesn't belong to her, in a city that has no idea what it's holding. Maybe a former president sometimes sits with his thoughts in a way that looks, to anyone watching, like a man reflecting on his legacy. Maybe it's something else entirely. But here is the question those 3 researchers keep returning to, the one that none of them, after all these years, can answer. The cover-up was too clean. Not almost clean. Not mostly clean. Too clean. The kind of clean that isn't the absence of evidence. It's the presence of removal. Deliberate. Sophisticated. Expert. The kind that doesn't come from political consultants or intelligence academies. The kind that's earned over a lifetime of survival. The kind that belongs to a woman who understood, better than anyone, that power isn't about how loud you speak. It's about who goes quiet when you enter a room, and who ensures, when it becomes necessary, that the room forgets you were ever there. Because if there's one thing this entire story teaches us, one truth running beneath all of it like a current you can't see, but can always feel, it's this. Elena Vasari was never the woman who ran. She was the woman who chose when to move. And she hasn't moved yet. But here's the part no one can explain. If everything was erased so perfectly, why does the story still exist? Why are there still traces? Why are there still questions that no one can answer? Because maybe this was never about hiding. Maybe it was always about waiting. Waiting for the right moment. The right weakness. The right opportunity. Some stories don't end. They wait.
Please like and subscribe for more interesting stories.